All right, my friends. Good morning. Brian here with VetteSource. Today, in the back of the truck, where we're going to be taking a look at a C4 Corvette rear suspension that I was fortunate enough to have available for us. Usually, by the time I get these out of the cars and ready for sale, they're gone pretty quickly. So I don't usually have time to detail this suspension assembly and show some of the features of it and things of that nature. Now, I've been able to do, in the past, we have done some features. I've featured the C5 rear suspension and a couple other things. We've removed rear suspension C5s. We've torn down some suspensions. But this is the first time I've really been able to show in detail a C4 rear suspension and what it entails. Now, interesting thing about the Corvette suspensions, if you followed them for a while, they are independent rear suspensions, and they have been since 1963, all the way back in 63. Now, even as early as they were with the independent rear suspension, which, in fact, I've even detailed for you guys an early first-generation rear suspension independent for a Corvette, which is all steel, of course. But even though they were the first ones, or actually very early in the 60s to have one, they weren't the first. Jaguar actually had the independent rear suspension, came out in the XK series in 1961. Now, of course, today, everybody and their mama tries to come up with, hey, independent rear suspension. We've got an independent rear suspension. I think the Mustangs have independent rear suspension. I know some of the Audis have them. I know Porsche has them. In fact, even that little Mercedes out the window there that I've detailed before has a independent rear suspension in it, which I find amusing because it's not really a performance car. It's more of a luxury tuner, which, I'm not going to get into the argument of which one is better, independent versus solid axle, live axle, that kind of stuff, simply because they're for different purposes, right? You get kind of a nice road handling out of these suspensions and a road feel that you won't get from a solid axle. And of course, a solid axle is going to stand up a whole lot better under the abuses of drag racing. Now, some of the independent rear suspensions have gotten really strong where they'll handle, high horsepower numbers from the factory. But trust me, it's not a matter of if, it's just a matter of when you're going to destroy your independent rear suspension, launching it, on a 160, 60 foot or below or something crazy like that on a drag car on slicks. They're just not meant to handle the torque output a lot of times. And of course, if you've got any experience with aviation, specifically rotary aviation, you'll know that the weak point in a helicopter is essentially the tail rotor, 90-degree gearbox, and the drive shafts leading up to it, because those are always needing to be inspected and things of that nature to make sure you weren't over-torquing them, engine over-torquing a lot of those gas turbines that run those military helicopters, the Army specifically. So anyway, let's talk about this real quick, and I'll show you guys this suspension. Now, this is essentially a 1984 to 1986 C4 Corvette suspension, and in my opinion, this is probably the greatest of the cars. And a lot of the C4 stuff was really good, but this is probably the best and greatest engineering innovation they came up with. It's pretty much all aluminum, with the exception of course, your steel tie rod here. And you've got steel, obviously, rotors, and a few other steel bits, bolts and things of that nature, sway bar. But this thing is entirely aluminum. And it's kind of neat that they were able to do that. And it not only is it functional, but it's a very good-looking rear end, okay? Now, from 84 to 96, there were two versions of this differential installed in the cars. There was the Dana 36, which is what this one is, and there's the Dana 44. Now, the Dana 36 was installed in all automatic shift Corvettes with, what am I trying to say? With gear ratios ranging from 259 all the way up to 307. You could not get anything higher numerically than 307, which was the performance axle on the Dana 36. Those also had an 8-inch ring gear. The Dana 44s, on the other hand, were an 8.5-inch ring gear, where the case is a little bit bigger. You might, it's hard to see because I don't have one to compare it. And they would actually range in ratios from 307 up to, for a brief period of time, 3.54s, which I've never actually seen a 354, so I'm not sure if they actually even exist. They're listed in the 90 catalogs, but like I said, I've never seen one. I don't even think my ZR1 has a 354 in it. So anyway, and the easiest way, honestly, to tell the difference between a 36 and a 44 is a Dana 36 has, you can see here, 3 bolts. There's 1, there's 2, there's 3, whereas a Dana 44 has 2 bolts on the upper case. It does not have this center bolt here in the middle. The other thing too is that the snout on a Dana 44 is a little bit longer for that 8.5-inch ring gear that's set up. So the the drive shaft and the C-beam are both actually shorter on a Dana 44. So you can't just slap a 44 in your car with your original drive shaft and C-beam. It's not going to work. And the Dana 44 is also, there's something about internally balancing, so the drive shafts don't have the little harmonic balancer on them like the Dana 36 units do. So let's go ahead and look at this real quick, and I'll show you why this was such a functional piece of equipment. Now, the Jaguars were cool when they came out, but they were really boxy structure. In fact, they were built within a steel cage, it looks like, with the brakes all the way inboard right here, so it's not easy to work on. These are actually pretty easy. If you look at this suspension, I'm gonna move around here in the back of the truck so you can see a little bit better. So from each side, there are only 3 mount points that hang this from the actual car itself. And you've got this bracket up here in the front, right, that you've got your 2 dog legs, we call these, the unequal length dog legs. And this plate right here ties into the unibody structure in that pocket right there. So you've got 1, 2, and there's 3 bolts that hold that in. There's 3 there that hold these two dog legs in, and then you've got the main bolt here on the Batwing, which holds this up to the rear frame rails. And of course, the sway bar will actually install up on the back behind here. It switches back this way, right? And that bolts up there. But that's basically it that holds that entire suspension in the car. It's really cool. You'd think there'd be more mounting points, but they did a really good job, like I said, engineering this. So let's take a look here, and I'll show you basically. Okay, you've got your center differential chunk here with your input yoke here, output yokes there. You got both equal length half shafts coming out on either side, right? You've got the Batwing cover, which is specific to these C4 Corvettes. And again, it's going to be different from Dana 36 to Dana 44s. So you got this piece here where these snubs kind of fit up in there and keep it located. You've got your unequal length dog legs here on either side with that mounting bracket. And then you've got this spindle, which is really a work of art. There's a lot going on here. So this is an aluminum spindle, and it's got no less than the tie rod that runs and connects it. It's got the spring connected to it here on the bottom, and then way up underneath here there is your camber rod. Okay, so camber adjustments and toe in on this car are controlled by that bolt right there. That'll control your camber, if I'm thinking about my suspension geometry correctly. And then on your tie rod assembly is mounted right there in that middle, and that controls your toe in back and forth. Now, of course, you've got the 88s and above change the parking brake assembly. So you've got your parking brake extension right here, okay, or your brake caliper bracket. And then what that does, that's where that extra length comes from, these two, because these are really popular with hot rodders. And the earlier suspensions are about 53 inches across, and the laters are 56, 57. I think if I'm remembering off the top of my head. So the 56 or the 88s and above have this extension here. That's your extra inches that you're getting, because the parking brake changed from the old style with the brake shoes inside the rotor into this cable style, where it's just a pull cable that actually pulls the parking brake. There's a parking brake cable right there. And of course, this ties in, this is the other end of where we talked about last week or a couple weeks ago with that parking brake handle on these C4 Corvettes. So when you're pulling that handle, that's what this pulling is, that spring-loaded piece right there to activate the lever that makes that clamps down on the, it's a mechanical force that clamps down on the brakes itself. So you've got your wheel bearing right here, and then of course this just ties in. Now this is a pretty easy differential to take apart, but you got to know what you're doing as far as bolt size. There's a couple of bigger bolts on it, things of that nature that got to be done. And the one thing that's kind of hard to get to on these is, you can see right there, there's our bolts for the wheel bearings. They're tucked way back in that corner over there. So those are a little bit tricky to get to. I think in the next video what I'll do is I'll show you guys how to tear this down just for fun so that you can see what's there. But like I said, this is a really cool piece, and even to this day this suspension is more highly desired by builders than the C5 and newers, and of course the C3s. Nobody really is going to adapt a C3 all steel rear differential to a car, but the C4s really have a lot of good features about them that make them easy to put. Not easy, but you can fabricate things to put these in other cars. I mean, they put them in trucks, they put them in all kinds of stuff. So it's still going to be the king of conversions for that matter. And they even have gone so far where even if you have a differential that's got, say, a 2 series carrier, you can actually get a gear set I think all the way up to 345. I think it's a Yukon gear that makes them, and you can install those straight into a 2 series carrier without having to change everything out. They used to be one of the limiting factors on the 2 series carriers. But you can even see the way, just as an aside, I forgot here, the way this rear leaf spring, this is our mono-leaf rear spring right here, the way that mounts in there with those shims underneath there, and these are just 2 aluminum brackets that hold that in place, and then of course you've got your mount bolt right there. So yeah, I think this one will make a good demonstration unit to tear apart, simply because I probably won't keep it together unless somebody just tells me they want it really quickly, because it's a little bit grungy. It's been sitting around for a while, and sometimes guys need the individual components. So that's going to wrap it up for today, guys. I got a whole laundry list of things I've got to go do, but I wanted to share this with you, like I said, since it was unusual for me to have one without being taken away by a customer immediately. So I'll be checking back in next week, and we'll talk to you guys then. Thanks for watching.